Next problem, 14 minus x is 8. If you want to move the x to the other side and the 8 to this side, that's fine, because then you can do it in your head. Negative x becomes what? Positive x. Positive 8 becomes, so you have 14 and minus 8 is x is 6. Look at that problem though. 14 minus what is 8? 14 minus 6 is 8. All you have to do is, and what you're doing when you say plug it in, we're doing trial and error if you do that. If you just look at that and say, okay, what would make x equal to, then that's called trial and error. If you didn't move the x over, if you move just the 14 over, you've got this. 14 minus x equals 8. Hang on a second. If you move the 14 over, you're left with negative x equals 8 minus 14. Because if you say 14 minus 8, think about 14 minus 8. What's positive and what's negative? 14's positive, 8's negative. But if you move the 14 over, what's supposed to be negative? The 14 and the 8 is supposed to be positive. So that's going to give you the wrong symbol. It's going to give you the wrong positive negative sign. So if you move this over, it becomes negative 14. You have a negative 14 and a positive 8. What is that? Negative 6. Now, you've got to get rid of that negative symbol. Move it over here. Negative negative is going to be positive 6. Either way is fine. Either way you want to work it. This is the reason why. Look at this. What could you put in the place of x to make that a true statement? Take the x out. In order to make that true, put a 1 there. That's true? Negative 1 equals negative 6? No. What would you put in the place of that blank? You'd put a 6 there. Isn't negative 6 equal to negative 6? That makes sense. So that's the reason, if a negative x is equal to negative 6, that's the reason x must be 6. What can you take the x out and substitute in to make that true? X equals 6. Next up, got a couple of word problems. I'm not going to work example 5. We're not going to use graphing calculators. But example 3, you need to know how to do these. It says a class wants to go on a field trip that will cost them $456. So far they've raised $250. Write an equation that tells how much more they must raise for the trip. You're probably telling me, and will tell me, we don't even have to have an equation to solve this. This is too easy. Why are we going to have to write an equation? There's reasons. Part of the reason is my juniors and seniors are horrible at writing equations and solving word problems. Correct, Sandra? They are horrible at word problems. The reason they're horrible at word problems is because whenever they were in the 9th grade and they came up on problems like this, they said, why do we have to write that as an equation? Why can't we just do that in our head? And the teacher probably said, all right, go ahead and do it in your head. And it led to them not being very good at word problems. So let me show you. Let's take this problem and write it as an equation. The first thing I want you to do is identify your unknown. And when I say identifying unknowns, writing equations, you remember last chapter when it was like you join a CD club, you pay $10 up front and $9 per CD. That was writing equations. This is the same thing. This is a more simple equation. So it says a class wants to go on a field trip. It's going to cost them $456 total dollars. They've raised $250. How much more should they raise? What do you not know? Let x equal how much more they need to raise. And there are 4 different ways that we can write this equation. That's going to be the first one. X plus, see if you can, good, equals 456. Let's talk about that. This is how much more they need to raise. This is how much they've already raised. If you add those two together, will you not get how much total they need? The amount you need to raise, or excuse me, the amount you need to raise, the amount you've already raised is going to equal the total amount that you need. There's one way to write this equation. Somebody want to give me another way you could write it? That is, you can do that. 250 plus x equals 456. Why are those two the same thing? What property? Commutative property. If you add two things, it doesn't matter what order you add them in. It's the same thing. How else could we write it? 456 minus 250 equals x, and there's one other way. There you go. So you can either add the two amounts, and it's going to give you the total amount you need. You can take this would be the way you normally worked it, would it not? You just take the total amount, subtract off what they've already raised. That's going to tell you how much more they need to raise. The last way to do it, you can take the total amount, subtract off how much you need to raise, and that's going to give you the amount you have already raised. Now let's talk about why these are all the same thing. We've already talked about why these two are. If I took and moved 250 to this side of the equal sign, it would change plus 250 to minus 250, and you would have x equals what? Well, 456 minus 250, which is that. Does that make sense? That's what I was trying to get at. Those two equations are the same because the 250 has just been moved over. Why are this one and this one the same? The x has been moved over. If you took and moved the x over here, positive x becomes negative x. Do you see it? Then it's the same thing as 456 minus x is 250. That's the reason all four of these are the same, but regardless of which one you use, solve any of them, x equals $206. Any question? You need the equation and you need the answer. Last problem. On a test, the range of scores is 54, the high score is 97. Write and solve an equation describing the situation. Listen very closely because there's one on your homework identical to this, and I had a ton of people ask me last blog, now what's the range again? What is that? I didn't hear you talk about that. I'm talking about it. Let's say that somebody in here made 100 on their test years, and somebody else made a 50. The high score is 100, the lowest score is the 50. What's the range between those two scores? 100 to 50, the range is 50. What if the high score is 100 and the lowest score is a 20? Can you tell me the range? It's 80. If the high score is a 70 and the lowest score is a 60, what's the range? 10. How do you find the range? You subtract. What do you subtract? The highest, finish it up. The highest minus lowest is equal to what? The range. The range simply tells you the distance between the top and the bottom. Think about a shooting range. Okay, you've got, at a shooting range, you've got you sitting here, you've got the target sitting here. Do you see the distance? It's talking about the range there is the distance between you and the target. Okay, so anytime you think about a range, you're talking about a distance from here to there. Okay, so the range is the distance from the highest to the lowest. So there you go. What about this? I know this is kind of off task, but could I do lowest minus highest to give me the range? Why not? Because it would come out negative. So could I do this to give me a range? Sure. Would that give you the same answer as this? Sure. Yes, sir. Absolute value bars. That's on your test here, Steve. Yeah. The highest minus lowest is equal to the range. So let's go back to our problem now. On a test, the range of scores is 54. The highest score is a 97. Write and solve an equation that describes the situation. What are you looking for there? Well, what were you actually looking for in terms of just English here? The range is 54. The high score is 97. What are we missing? The lowest score. There we go. So let's go back here. It says the range is 54. So in place of range, put a 54. The high score is a what? 97. So you have 97 minus. Do we know the lowest score? Put a x. Does everybody see how we got that equation? Guys, an equation is simply a set of steps that arrives at a conclusion. To find the range, you do highest minus lowest equals range. Plug in what you don't know, plug in what you do know, and use it to find out that unknown. So how do we solve that? Move 97 over, we can do that. So that gives you negative x equals, that'll be a negative 97 when you move it over. Positive, negative, which do I have more of? How many? Negative 43. Move my x over there, or excuse me, move my negative sign over there, I have x equals. So therefore, what did x stand for? What did it stand for though? The lowest test score, so our lowest test score is a 43.